people think a brand is just a logo, but what like our studio and my boss especially is trying to espouse locally is that trying to get people to understand and get into the mindset of realizing branding is not just a little icon that goes on your brand. There's so much more to it. I never went to university to study graphic design or art. That's something I've learned on my own. Yeah.
What are your necessary requirements when as a graphic designer?
Well, I think first and foremost you need a strong idea. After working in the corporate world for about 2 years, I just felt it wasn't for me. I wasn't finding any kind of fulfillment in the job. So I decided to make a switch, and I haven't looked back since.
Hi Akila, welcome to the canvas. How are you doing?
Hi Azhar, I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure having you on the show. And I have a question, how do you describe yourself as a person? You can describe yourself through 3 characteristic traits. Tell us about yourself through that.
Well, 2 to 3 characteristics. All right. So 1, like any normal functioning adult, I use humor to get by. It's a coping mechanism. And I also use humor to just sort of hide the fact that I do tend to be quite serious when it comes to certain things. I keep people guessing when they're around me, basically. Another thing about me, I would say, maybe something that a lot of people do not know about me is that I do tend to get angry quite quickly, but I also cool off quite quickly. But what's funny is that I don't think a lot of people realize it because it's all happening inside my head and I'm the only person sort of sitting through it. It's very rare that I let my anger flare up and physically show itself. And 3, I tend to try and be warm and receptive towards everyone, unless they obviously give me a reason to do so otherwise. And especially in situations where there's a new person entering a social setting where they are the outsider, I know what it feels like to be the outsider in so many situations, so I can imagine what they're going through. So I always try to make them feel warm and welcome, like that they are important and that their presence is most welcome in that social setting. So yeah, those are 3 things I think that really what make me me.
That's very interesting to hear. Now, from judging from what you told me about your personality and describing yourself, and when I see your art, is it a way of channeling those inner feelings and those, how you feel inside of certain situations or topic? Is it a way of channeling it? Because you said in a way you're very patient. You keep things to yourself unless you need to speak up, you'll speak up. So is your art also a way of channeling that, of expressing your views in a more, let's say in a more better way?
Yeah, definitely. Without question, because I think that's my way of expressing themselves. Other people they're good at making speeches or boosting morale of a team. For me, the way I express myself and my thoughts and opinions is through my art. And that also, I don't make it. I also like to play with the boundaries of things. I also put a level of ambiguity into my work, where my feelings might be clearer to the most thought out most discerning person, but to some people it might make them question what does this artwork mean, what is he saying, it's all. I always try to have that tongue in cheek ambiguity sometimes in my work. That's something I enjoy doing.
That's really interesting because it keeps the viewer guessing, okay, what's the message here? Maybe sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's okay, what's this guy actually trying to refer to or express? So now let's talk about your style exactly. Is it it's a mix of pop culture but and graphic design obviously, but how would you describe your style specifically?
To describe my style in a very succinct way would be pop culture inspired, comic book inspired artworks that also can sometimes be a social commentary or it just sometimes plain old crazy nonsense that my mind dreams up. I think the comic book aspect comes purely from my lifelong love for comics. I collect comics To be fair, though, I haven't collected in quite a while, but yeah, it's something. It's an interest that's sort of been there aside from drawing for quite a while now. And in terms of social commentary, I think that mostly comes from having worked for a short period of time in an editorial setting, and I think that just made me look at things a bit more like real life situations and like the social issues and things like that. And even that, I don't let that be the controlling factor in my work. That it's always like a part of it that I allow to be influenced by that. But more or less, I always try to keep things moving and keep people guessing as to what my next artwork would be. It's always not like you're going to come onto my stream of work and think, okay, I know this next artwork is going to be exactly like this. I try to avoid that and keep things fresh for each and every iteration.
Definitely. And now in terms, let's talk about like your career, like professionally, what do you do as of now?
So professionally, according to my CV, I'm an illustrator and graphic designer who has a focus on commercial and editorial illustrations, as well as branding and like graphic design at large. And currently, I'm working at a little boutique studio called Studio Nice One.
So now tell us more about the boutique studio, like what exactly happens there? Like,
well, it's a one-stop shop, I would say, honestly. Like, there's a lot of creative work we do, and obviously I'm saying that I have to also admit that there are certain things we don't do, but our focus mainly is brand identity design. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with this, where it's people think a brand is just a logo, but what like our studio and my boss especially is trying to espouse locally is that trying to get people to understand and get into the mindset of realizing branding is not just a little icon that goes on your brand. There's so much more to it. So, which is what we are trying to accomplish in our work, and also we're trying to do something that is fresh and new and not seen before. And in outside of that, we also take up projects of commercial illustrations, packaging design. We've even done fashion. Currently, we have a kids fashion line that's we've helped create for one of our clients, and that'll be launching quite soon. Quite a lot of interesting projects, basically. Yeah, it's a fun place to work where no two projects are alike. It's always something different and something new and exciting.
so it sounds like it's very interesting what you do. Like each client or coming to work every day, it's like a different sort of challenge, you know, but in a good way, in a positive way. Now let's talk about in terms of the pandemic. Things have gotten, like, as you can see, the news clearly says what's going on. How are you facing that situation? Like as a creative, like what are the struggles you are facing? Are you facing any struggles?
Well, Azhar, to be fair, like I think my job is more like easy to turn into a work from home situation. I mean, I will admit, I'm sure my boss will attest to this. Like, there are certain things we could probably get done faster if we were in a physical space, but at the same time, I think we have the luxury of being able to work relatively easier working from home than it might be the case for in certain other industries and other lines of work. And in terms of my like my own personal freelance projects, even that has mostly always been like remote based, so that has barely been impacted. So yeah, not COVID, while it has been a very trying and testing time for many people, I'm glad and fortunate enough to say that it hasn't impacted me too badly, and virtually not at all. So yeah, very fortunate in that way.
I'm really glad for you, and I'm really happy that it's actually somehow you guys are getting to manage with what you all have, and it's good. I'm glad. And I just wanted to ask now, you mentioned freelance and working through with commissions as well. Talk to us about that experience, like in terms of, let's say, from a professional angle and even financially. How is it like so far also with the situation?
Again, having a steady job really helps. I think in my situation, it's always something I've more or less relied on. I never felt the need or the urge to sort of go off on my own completely. I'm completely happy with working in an office setting, and I'm not one of those people who feel like they're bound and they're caged by like having to work for somebody else. But at the same time, I also do enjoy the freedom of being able to work on my own projects and like take on things that might not necessarily get picked up by our studio. So it's a win-win in most cases. And also at the same time, I'm not reliant on having to get like freelance commissions, or I can like sit back and let a month go by where I do nothing for no one and just draw stuff for myself, and it wouldn't be a bad month. Like I wouldn't be in a dire situation, so to speak.
That's really good that even your boss is very understanding, and your what you call, because some places they don't allow that to happen. But I'm glad for you. I'm very happy for you, because then in a way you have the best of both worlds, even like working as a full-time employee at the same time working freelance, because then you don't only get to focus on a specific type of client, you can also work with different types of people as well. So I'm glad. And so what exactly inspired you to get into this field? Because from seeing your Instagram feed, you're someone who has been really consistent. There are a lot of artists, but you have been very consistent, and your work speaks for itself. So what exactly inspired you to, for let's say from the beginning till now, what exactly like made you still get through it?
First off, thank you for your compliment. I appreciate that. It's always great to hear that people enjoy my work. And in terms of inspirations from the start, I've always been into art. Like since I was a kid, I've been drawing, scribbling. My mother has laminated all artworks of mine as proof, so that even when I'm 100 years old, I will still know that I used to draw. And since then, I've had like a lot of people who sort of helped me on my journey. I had like a particular tuition teacher that taught me art at a young age, and he means the world to me. Even though I haven't seen him in a long time, I've spoken to him, but still, like the impact he's made in my life, it'll go a long way. And quite a few people, even like the friend of mine who I met at university, who sort of introduced me into the world of digital art. To be fair, I would have never gotten into this field if it wasn't for him. And then obviously there have been like greater like inspirations of like more prominent artists like who I've admired from afar, locally and internationally, who are always constantly an inspiration, even though our line of work or even the kind of work that we do may not align. Like just seeing the way they put out their work, the amount of work they put in, basically the end result that they are delivering, it's inspiring to basically want to sort of aspire to have that same level of experience and skill and effort into my own work.
Definitely. So in a way, your peers and your friends have, in a way, it's like healthy competition, I would say. Not competition exactly, but it's more like they inspire you in a way. Like, I should also work this hard. I shouldn't just, be lazy. And I've seen that through your work. And I just want to ask now, you mentioned you didn't even know, a friend introduced you to digital, graphic designing and all that. So how long has it been actually since you've been doing this?
So digital art I've been doing probably since 2013. So while I was at uni, I think towards the end of my first year, I had a friend who was really, while he was not really pushing himself in terms of the kind of digital art he was doing, he was doing a very specific kind of digital art. But seeing his work and him sort of telling me, you should try it, I'm sure you can do a lot of cool things if you put your mind to it, and that just made me want to test out the waters. But other than that, before, art had always been just a fun thing I do to pass the time. If I have a pen or a paper, I'll just scribble something together. And to be fair, I met that friend while doing a business degree. I never went to university to study graphic design or art. That's something I've learned on my own. Yeah.
Wow, that's actually interesting. So how, if you don't mind, tell us a bit of your secrets of how exactly did you learn? Is it YouTube tutorials like everyone else, or tell us what exactly
I mean, I think it's with these great tools that we have access to in terms of creating digital art. There's a level of learning, yes, that you might have to learn the fundamentals and basics from online, but what's so great about them is not just going and looking at a tutorial to achieve a particular finish or effect. What's cool is that you can try experimenting with those. It's always good to learn. I've learned tons of things off YouTube. I'm pretty sure even this last week there were 2 things I've tried through a YouTube tutorial. But what I think matters even more is that experimentation that happens based off of those little learning moments you encountered through tutorials and things like that. So it's just a curiosity to explore, and experiment. That's what I would decide to be like a driving force in my own work, and like wanting to push and like not get too complacent even in your style and like the kind of work that you do.
Exactly. Always like get out of your comfort zone, because that's good. And what I meant also, like, I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, you can watch YouTube tutorials and watch it how much you want, but at the end of the day, you have to get, like you mentioned, hands-on with it. You know, and there are
Exactly.
yeah, you have to get hands-on with it. And there are, it's not only YouTube tutorials, there are even courses. If you're very interested in something, you can actually go apply and try it out. But I'm glad you mentioned that mostly it just depends on you actually opening whatever software or tool you have and just trying it out, because then only you can, test yourself and get out of your comfort zone. And now I just wanted to ask, what are your necessary requirements when as a graphic designer? Like, you tell me, like, it doesn't only require, like, it doesn't only need to be the tools, or like, let's say the laptop or the software, Adobe Illustrator and all. What else do you need when you're in that space, in that zone of, of creating and producing work?
Well, I think first and foremost you need a strong idea. I've had tons of half-baked ideas. Like my hard drives can show you like of complete tons of like incomplete work, where I've thought of something and tried something out, but it was not really fully developed, and there was no like runway to actually get the artwork executed. So I would abandon them sometimes even before they reach like the 50% mark. So I would definitely say a strong idea is very, very important, because that's what drives your work when you're actually executing it. You every pen stroke, every line, every text, every drop of color, everything gets driven by that need to see that mental idea that you've come up with, that in your head, be executed on a tangible like medium. So I think that that's applicable to both digital and like other forms of art. So that's what I would say. If you were to speak in terms of equipment, for me, I think pen and paper goes a long way. I spent years doodling with pen and paper, but for me now, I think my go-to tool is my iPad and my Apple Pencil. Basically, I can, wherever I am, I can just start drawing something. So it's always great to have access to that.
Now, Akila, I wanted to ask, were there times you ever wanted to give up in this field?
Well, that's an interesting question, because for me, it has been quite the opposite. For me, growing up, art and any relevant creative field has always felt like something that wasn't for me. My art was something I did for out of escape from everything else. So I didn't even think about it when it came time for me to like go off to university. So, which, like I mentioned earlier, um, I studied a business degree. I have a bachelor's in business management. And after working in the corporate world for about 2 years, I just felt it wasn't for me. I wasn't finding any kind of fulfillment in the job. So I decided to make a switch, and I haven't looked back since. And like you said, whether I've experienced any moments of wanting to give up, still haven't encountered any of them. And I'm hoping I never will, because I'm really enjoying what I'm doing and the kind of people I'm getting to work with and the kind of work that I get to do. It's something that really brings me joy. So yeah, I hope so far never, and I hope never to experience it in the future.
And I hope that continues, honestly. And now let's talk about, for people who don't understand artist or even your type of art, anything you'd like to say to them?
Well, if you don't understand art, that's fine. Like or even a particular kind of art, just move on. Like don't have to dwell on it and like harp on it and like just make a big scene out of it. Art is not always something that's meant to be understood by a person. I think art, first and foremost, is always an expression of the artists themselves. Now, whether you understand it or not, that's a whole other conversation. If you do understand it, if you think like a particular artist's work or a particular art piece even is something that you enjoy, that's something that makes you feel something, great. Share some words of encouragement with the artist. Applaud them for their skill and their talent, and if you have the means to do so, buy some art. Like if you feel like that particular piece of artwork moves you to that extent, and if you have the means to do so, go ahead, purchase it, support an artist, because Some people make a living off like selling their work, and to them it would mean the world, like someone going out of their way to purchase a piece of theirs. And yeah, if my I think the biggest key takeaway from that is, if you can't understand art, that's fine, or particular artwork, just don't try to tear it down or like sort of bad mouth it. Let other people enjoy things, yeah, and just walk away from it. Yeah.
Exactly. I like how I like that's exactly how artists should think in general, or even like the general audience. But that's the thing, we can't change everyone, and I really like your perspective of how you see it. So now let's talk about what are the frustrations, or like anything like you have heard that has, like, what's one of the worst things you heard as an artist?
Well, there's nothing in particular that really comes to mind, but what I would like to like bring up is like how some people don't really necessarily respect the creative fields. It doesn't have to be art in particular. It could be photography, it could be videography, or any other thing, graphic designer, whatever the case may be. Just there's some people who do not see that as a real job. Like they and I've never had anyone explicitly tell this to my face, whether like, I think your job's not a real job or anything like that, but you can tell sometimes in conversations. You can pick up little signs and notations about the tone of voice that they are using, and you can tell like how they truly feel about something, and they don't really respect you or think of the work that you do they don't think of it as meaningful work, basically.
So now we are coming to the end of this show. Any words of advice you'd like to share to those watching?
Well, I would like to pass on some advice to young people looking to start off working in a creative field, whether it be a graphic designer or illustrator. For those of you who complain about not being able to get hired or get commissions because you do not have a portfolio, basically there's this idea that some people have that a portfolio is a catch-22 situation, where without a portfolio you can't get hired to do work, but without getting hired for work you have no portfolio. But that's a completely made up problem. If a person truly really wants to get into a particular field or be hired for a certain kind of work, all they have to do is take up the initiative, do their own work, create their own pieces of art or graphic design, or just take up a personal project, something that you find interesting, and showcase that work. And that is how you will be able to eventually get work that will get you hired or get you commissioned for.
Exactly, I totally understand, and that's really good advice for those who are just coming and like fresh out of university and want to apply for a job, because you can't wait for opportunities to come to you. You have to somehow like grab them and make your own, to be honest. So thank you, Akila. It was a very insightful conversation, and I'm glad you came on the show as a guest, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Take care. Have a nice day.